What's your best story that is 100% real, but nobody believes you? Story 1. My friend got a girl pregnant when he was 13, and the girl was 15. They met at a beach in Panama City, Florida. She was rich and lived in Ohio. He was poor and lived in Georgia. My friend never told anyone but me. He is now 28 and has a 15-year-old kid only I know about. The only reason he got away with it is because this girl's family was super rich. The girl never said who the guy was and would sometimes fly down to visit him in secret. I did not believe this until I saw pictures of his kid. His kid has never met him either, and I don't think he even knows he exists. I always daydreamed that if my friend died, I would have to tell his parents that he actually had a kid, and they had been a grandma and grandpa for 15 years and never knew it. Story 2. When I was in elementary school, my brother and I were walking home from school after it had rained all day. He started reaching his hand in all the puddles. I asked him what he was doing. "Sometimes there's money in these," he said. 3 or 4 of the puddles later, he pulled out a $20 bill. Not sure if he ganked it from somewhere else and planted it, or it was legit. Either way, I now check puddles for treasures when there are no witnesses. Story 3. When I was 15 years old, I was in my kitchen, home alone, cutting a pineapple. There was a fly that was buzzing around my face for the past 2 minutes, and it was getting really annoying, so, just for the heck of it, out of pure blind rage, I grabbed the knife and swung it at the fly in midair. I sliced the fly in half. Sliced it in half. After I did that, I immediately realized no one would ever believe me. Story 4. On the way to visit a friend, my husband and I got lost on the highway in Pennsylvania. By some weird chance, my husband's friend drives past us in the opposite direction. We see him and turn around to catch up to him. Finally pulling over, we are standing on the side of the road, a 2-lane highway, discussing the directions to the friend's house. Surrounding us are farms with corn and other various crops. Out of nowhere, a duck appears on the opposite side of the road. He's looking at us curiously while we are talking. We watch him look both ways and waddle across the road where we are standing. Cars are honking at him as they attempt to drive past. He gets over to my husband, pecks at his shoe once, and then promptly walks back across the street, dodging cars traveling at highway speed. He made it back across the street and disappeared into the crops. He risked his life to peck my husband's shoe and simply waddle out of our lives. I can't help but feel like maybe you should have followed him back across the street. Possibly he was trying to show you something. He was the best companion Farmer Fred ever had. When Fred fell off his tractor and crushed his pelvic bone, he sent Dwayne, his trusty duck, to help. Dwayne came back with no help. Fred cursed his pet duck. Fred died a slow, painful death, only second in pain to the voice of his wife in his conscience telling him, "A duck? A duck? Really, Fred? You should have just gotten a dog like every other normal person." Story 5. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was really into humorous wiki vandalizations and thought it would be funny to claim that the kiwi fruit were once called hairy bush fruit. I modified the page on kiwi fruit to say so. I cut and pasted some random Chinese characters from somewhere in the article. Since then, it has been repeated all over the place and currently returns 61,000 hits on Google. It has been printed in The Guardian, which means it is now 100% verifiable fact and will quite likely never be removed from the offending article. It's kind of a scary implication. The Guardian journalist that wrote that article should have noted that Wikipedia was used as a reference, but didn't. There could quite easily be other circular references like this, where a journo repeats something incorrect lifted from Wikipedia and publishes it, which then means the incorrect fact can be referenced in the press. Story 6. As a child, I can remember standing out on the apartment balcony watching kangaroos in the distance. My mother used to make homemade clay for me to play with using flour and some other kitchen materials. I didn't have a bed. I slept mostly in an empty room with a few toys, cars, and one of those Hot Wheel tracks that go around the loop. I've never been outside the U.S. My mother claims she's never done this or even knows how to make clay, and that I've always had a bed, and I am 100% sure I'm not adopted. Sure enough, those memories are there, multiple memories of it. Not like some kind of weird, out of the ordinary kind of memory. More like those were the general kind of memories from my childhood. Story 6. How I ended up with my dog. I was on my way to the bus when I saw this dog calmly walking about. He approached me, I petted him a bit, and then went on my way. For some reason, he kept on following me. There were other people around us, but he kept on walking behind me. The bus station is by a busy street. I hoped to shake him off by the time I got there, but no. I wasn't sure what would happen if I got on the bus. Would he run after it? Would he hop on the bus? The stop I intended to hop off on is another heavily trafficked place. Neither of the options looked good, so I did the only thing I could think of. I headed home. On the way, I called my dad and told him a dog was following me. He laughed, thinking it was my way of trying to skip school. He went along with it, though, promising to drive us to the nearby dog shelter. Imagine his surprise when I came home with a dog. So, we drove to the dog shelter, where we have to turn him in. A week or so later, we get a call saying that no one had claimed the dog or reported him missing. My dad wanted a dog, a different breed though, but seeing as this fellow had followed me around, he figured, well, this is the dog. And that, kids, is how I met my dog. Story 8. Once when I was a kid, my uncle and I were visiting a friend of his at the convenience store where he worked, a few blocks from our house. There was this Rottweiler there, and he followed us home. This being in the 80s, we figured he had been abandoned and just figured we'd keep him. Abandoned dogs are nothing unusual in this town, even now. A couple weeks later, we went with the dog to the park across from the convenience store. Dude was there and called the dog by name, and the dog responded. Obviously, we'd found the owner. So the guy put Bear in his car and we went to leave. Bear jumped out of the window and followed us. Guy said that we could have him since he obviously wanted to be with my uncle. He was a great dog. Story 9. I was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, on a business trip. The night before departure, I wanted a drink, but the lounge of the hotel was closed for a private party. I didn't want to go out of the building alone at that time, so I started talking to one of the private guards. Then this lady came closer and asked if there were any problems. I explained to her that I was hoping to get a drink, but didn't want to bother. She started talking in a very good English. I can speak enough Portuguese to get by, but I'm definitely not fluent, and explained to me it was a party after a wedding. She was older than me, probably late 40s, but very good looking. She asked me if I wanted to join her upstairs for a drink, and she brought me to her room. We spent 30 minutes banging on every possible surface until she told me she had to go back to the lounge. I asked her why the hurry, and she told me that she was the mother of the bride. I was watching a minor league game and asked Deion Sanders for a hello. That was it. He waved me off, and I was about 7 deep at this time, and somehow, what a prima donna came out of my mouth. The look on his face when he stared at me was priceless. Fast forward to now, and he is ending his career with Dallas, and I am waiting for a flight out. He has a huge posse holding up the line, so I yell, "What prima donna is holding up the damn line?" His posse parts, and he looks at me. Then a hint of recognition hit his face, and he goes back to talking to the ticket lady, with a quizzical look on his face. Story 11. When I was in 5th grade, I ate stuffed mushrooms with Slash from Guns N' Roses while I was visiting my aunt in LA, who was a record producer for Geffen Records at the time. First time I ever tried stuffed mushrooms. I only ate them because Slash offered them to me, and I didn't want him to think I was a little kid. I was a bit starstruck. He probably could have handed me a turd and I would have ate it to somehow impress him. 10-year-old logic, I guess. Story 12. No one ever believes me. I was 8 years old, and my babysitter was 16. My parents worked extremely late, the overnight shift, so she often slept over. One night, she decided to sleep in my bed. I asked her to show me her boobs, and she did, and told me that I could touch them. She was also only wearing a thong. It's probably borderline sexual assault or something, but I didn't care. I was the only 8-year-old that had asked to see, and received. I looked her up on Facebook recently, and she is really gross now. Story 13. I was walking down my driveway to wait for the school bus in middle school, and I noticed a cute little fawn maybe 10 yards away. I lived in a wooded area. I was just thinking how cute this little guy was when its mother came crashing through the woods, headbutts my hip, and hauls ass back through the trees with its baby. I had a bruise on my hip for a week, and no one would believe how I got it. Story 14. When I was about 16, I was in a restaurant in Melbourne with my cousin. I noticed a young guy eating with his family. I said to my cousin, "Hey, look, it's Harry Potter," because of his similarities with Daniel Radcliffe. My cousin replied, that is Harry Potter." It was. He was in Australia shooting an Aussie film. A bit later, I went to the toilet to pee. Whilst I was at the urinal, Daniel came in and began to pee in the urinal next to me. I looked over at him and we made eye contact, and he said, "Nice wand," finished, washed his hands, and walked out. No one has ever believed this, and only my cousin can vouch for me. TLDR, Daniel Radcliffe told me I had a nice wand whilst we were urinating next to each other. Story 15. When I was a wee little thing, I loved the Power Rangers. This was when the Power Rangers first came out. They were all that was good and right with the world, and damn it, I was the member of their fan club. I was in Discovery Zone and saw them, the Power Rangers, who'd shown up for some kid's birthday in a private room. I begged and pleaded with my father to let me meet them, but he told me that I couldn't go in there because it wasn't my party and I didn't know anyone, and they would kick me out. In theory, he was right. Well, as we walked away, my little feet trudged me back to the door. I cracked it open and slipped into the private room where the other kids were having a blast, and the Power Rangers were talking to everyone equally. I got to meet them, shake their hands, and give them all hugs. It was probably the defining moment of my life up until that point. My dad looked mortified, but walked into the private room in an attempt to fetch me and apologize. But lo and behold, no one really cared that I was there. No one seemed to notice that I didn't know anyone, and none of the parents seemed to notice that no one knew my father. In hindsight, most of the parents probably didn't know each other and were at the party just to be with their kids. At this point, I should mention that I met the Power Rangers. Not some people dressed in Power Ranger costumes, but the actors who played them on TV. At the time, I didn't even understand the concept behind actors, so to me, these guys were the Power Rangers, and when they left, they would go back to fighting monsters. I spent an hour with some random kids, who became my friends, and the Power Rangers, before I got tired, wished everyone goodbye, and they waved back like we'd been friends forever. The other kids were friendly. The Power Rangers were awesome people, and the parents all seemed super chill about it. Story 16. When I was little, my younger brother and I were always staying with babysitters during the day. This one time, we were with the same babysitter for a few months. As soon as we got to her house, I would hang me and my brother's coat on the coat hangers that were strategically placed right before the basement stairs. My brother was too little to reach the coat hangers, so I would have to hang his for him. One day, he got this stubborn idea that he wanted to hang his own coat. I remember being nervous, but I let him try anyways. He picked the hanger that is the closest one possible to the top of the basement stairs. As he is on his tippy toes, struggling to reach the hanger, he all of a sudden falls over and down the basement stairs. The babysitter heard him crying, then accused me of pushing my baby brother down the stairs. She told my mom about it later. To this day, no one believes me that I didn't do it. I would never hurt my little brother. Story 17. I got a call from a police officer telling me if I didn't pay some old fines within the week, he would come and arrest me. The total was $267.63. It was about 2 weeks before Christmas, so I was really sweating it. The very next day, I got a check in the mail for $267.63 for overpaid child support throughout the year. Craziest, most unexplainable thing I've ever had happen to me. Story 18. When I was like 11, I went to this big children's fishing festival where all the kids in attendance got their names put into a hat and then drawn out to determine which guide they were paired with, in groups of 2 to 3 per guide. Well, lo and behold, My name is First, so my brother and I get to go with a number one guy there, who happens to be a professional fisherman or something. The guy was the only guide to come with his own cameraman, like an actual cameraman tagged along with us. So apparently this guy, who was very nice and I had a great time with, is a somewhat famous fishing video maker, and my brother and I were filmed every time we reeled in a fish. The guide told us we may make it into one of his videos or even into a fishing TV show, but he didn't know for sure. So one day, I'm sitting there watching ESPN on a Sunday morning before church, and there I am with my little brother catching a big walleye. Of course, my parents were getting ready, and my brother was in the shower, so no one else saw it, but it was nuts. This was before DVR or anything, and I had no idea it was coming on, so I couldn't set up a recording. But I was on ESPN for like 30 seconds. Probably the pinnacle of my fame right there. Story 19. Was working at a bar with a girl who used to be married to a pro wrestler. One night, the British Dog, Sid Vicious, and Macho Man Randy Savage came in for beers and to say hi to her. They ended up hanging out all night long and get loaded. Then she tells me that they are looking for some drugs. I called my dealer at the time, and he dropped some off, and I and the other bartender were invited to go drinking with them after our shift. Ended up going in a limo with Sid and Macho Man and doing tons of things on the way back to their hotel, where we witnessed Mean Gene Okerlund killing it with some 20-something girls. Best part of the night, and maybe my life, we pulled up to a stoplight, and Macho Man, incredibly amped at this point, as we all were, sticks half out of the sunroof next to a group of people waiting to cross the light and screams, "Snap into a Slim Jim!" He scared the shit out of half of them, and then the cheers erupted. I still chuckle. Story 20. When I was about 8 years old, my dad and I were throwing the Nerf Whistler football out in the yard. My dad had quite an arm back in the day, so when we got done throwing it around, he decided he wanted to send a laser right into the back of his truck from about 30 yards away. Naturally, I begin to run inside, and Dad accidentally hits me so hard with the Whistler that it left a permanent dimple in the side of my face. Lucky for me, though, it hit me square in the jaw where normal dimples usually are. That is probably the source of why people don't believe me, but it happened. Hearing that high-pitched whistle coming directly from my face was absolutely terrifying. Story 21. When I was 8, I was riding bikes with my mom, hit a gravel patch, and fell. I don't remember why I didn't have a helmet on, but I hit my head on a rock and was knocked unconscious. I saw and heard 2 old ladies walking down the street. They came over and stood by me for a little while. When I opened my eyes, my mom was running from a neighbor's house after calling an ambulance, and the old ladies were gone. 10 people came out to assist me. None of them saw those women, though. Story 22. When I was 12 years old, I owned a Chihuahua named Taco. We named him this because he looked identical to the famous Taco Bell dog on the commercials. You know, Yo quiero Taco Bell. Anyways, one day at home in the Gulf Coast of Florida, I took Taco out for a little walk so he could go to the bathroom. Mind you, Chihuahua's legs are so short that if they run away, you can catch them with no problem. So leashes aren't really required. Taco was minding his business, and as the 12-year-old boy I was, I got distracted by a pair of lizards on a tree. I noticed a shadow fly by and heard a little yelp. I switched my focus only to see Taco in the talons of an eagle or a hawk flying away into the sunset. I then proceeded to scream, "Taco, no!" But I couldn't do anything about it, so I walked inside and told my mom, and she still doesn't believe me to this day. 8 years later, and no one believes me, and I am still missing Taco. What do you think? Do you have any crazy stories that nobody believes? Leave them in the comment section below, and they may get featured in the next video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Chino, signing off.